crowd inside the Amsterdam arena in 1971 expected a spectacle, but no one expected the tension that filled the air when a towering Dutch kickboxing champion stepped into the ring. She weighed nearly 240 pounds, a powerhouse known across Europe for crushing opponents with raw strength and relentless kicks. Fans whispered the same question again and again. Why would Bruce Lee accept this challenge? Bruce Lee wasn't the biggest fighter in the room. Standing there, lean, calm, almost relaxed, he looked nothing like the giant standing across from him. Some in the crowd even laughed quietly, convinced that this was a mismatch. After all, the Dutch champion had size, reach, and weight on her side. But Bruce Lee had something the crowd couldn't measure with scales or statistics. The challenger cracked her knuckles, staring at Bruce Lee with the confidence of someone who had never been truly tested. She believed power would decide the fight. She believed weight would decide the fight. And in 1971, most people in that arena believed the same thing. But Bruce Lee believed something completely different. He believed speed could break power. He believed precision could defeat size. And most of all, he believed that martial arts was never about who looked stronger. It was about who understood movement, timing, and control. The bell hadn't even rung yet, and the entire arena was already divided. On one side were those who trusted brute force. On the other side stood a man who had built his entire philosophy on efficiency and adaptability. What happened next in that Amsterdam ring would shock everyone watching, because the fight was never really about weight or strength or intimidation. It was about the moment when confidence meets mastery. And in just a few seconds, the crowd would realize they were not watching an ordinary challenge. They were witnessing the exact reason Bruce Lee's name would echo through martial arts history for decades to come. The arena in Amsterdam was already loud before the fight was even announced. Rows of spectators filled the seats, their voices blending into a constant wave of excitement and curiosity. It was 1971, a time when martial arts exhibitions and challenge matches were becoming more popular across Europe. Fighters from different disciplines were beginning to test their skills against one another, and every event carried the promise that something unexpected might happen. That night, however, the anticipation felt different. Word had spread quickly that a Dutch female kickboxing champion, known for her incredible strength and towering presence, had issued a direct challenge. People talked about her everywhere in the arena. Some had seen her previous fights, others had only heard the stories, but the details were always the same. She was massive compared to most fighters, weighing around 240 pounds, with powerful legs that could deliver devastating kicks. Her style was aggressive and fearless, and opponents often struggled to survive even the early moments of a match. In the Netherlands, she had already built a reputation as a force that very few dared to challenge. But this time the situation was reversed. Instead of waiting for another opponent to face her, she had set her sights on someone whose name had begun to travel across continents: Bruce Lee. Even in 1971, Bruce Lee was becoming a mysterious figure in the martial arts world. Some people knew him from demonstrations and stories of his incredible speed. Others had heard whispers about his philosophy, his unconventional training methods, and the way he believed martial arts should evolve beyond rigid styles. Yet for many people sitting in that Amsterdam arena, Bruce Lee still looked like an unusual choice for such a challenge. He wasn't the largest fighter. He didn't carry the heavy frame that people often associated with power. Standing lean and composed, Bruce Lee appeared almost calm compared to the imposing presence of the Dutch champion. When spectators compared the two fighters side by side, the difference in size immediately became the topic of every conversation. Some fans leaned toward one another and laughed quietly, convinced that this challenge would end quickly. A few even believed Bruce Lee had made a mistake by accepting it. Across the ring, the Dutch champion prepared herself with absolute confidence. Her reputation had been built on domination. Fighters who stepped into the ring with her usually found themselves overwhelmed by her strength and relentless offense. She believed in direct power, forward pressure, and overwhelming force. Her kicks could shake an opponent's balance, and once she gained control of the fight, very few could recover. For her, the challenge against Bruce Lee was not just another match. It was an opportunity to prove that size and strength were still the ultimate deciding factors in combat. As the audience watched her warm up, they could see the confidence in her movements. Every strike she threw into the air carried visible force. Her footwork shook the canvas slightly as she shifted her weight. The message she sent to the crowd was clear. She was ready, and she believed the outcome was already decided. But Bruce Lee stood quietly on the opposite side of the ring. He stretched slowly, rotating his shoulders and wrists with deliberate focus. His movements looked controlled, almost effortless, as if he was conserving energy rather than displaying it. Some spectators misinterpreted his calmness as hesitation. Others saw it as something far more deliberate. Bruce Lee had always believed that martial arts was not simply about size or brute strength. To him, fighting was about timing, speed, efficiency, and adaptability. He studied how the human body moved, how balance shifted during attacks, and how a single well-placed strike could disrupt even the most powerful opponent. Yet none of that erased the obvious difference standing in the ring that night. The Dutch champion outweighed him by a massive margin. Her reach and raw power were undeniable, and for the crowd, this contrast made the challenge irresistible to watch. Rumors had spread earlier in the evening that the challenge itself had begun with a bold statement. According to several people present at the event, the Dutch champion had openly questioned whether Bruce Lee's reputation truly matched reality. She had reportedly said that speed and philosophy meant nothing against real power inside the ring. Those words had traveled quickly through the audience. By the time both fighters were preparing to step forward, the atmosphere had transformed into something electric. Spectators weren't just watching a fight. They were watching two completely different ideas about martial arts collide. On one side stood a champion who believed physical dominance would decide everything. On the other side stood a martial artist who believed efficiency and precision could overcome even the largest obstacle. The arena lights reflected off the ropes of the ring, and the crowd continued to buzz with speculation. Some people placed their bets quietly among friends. Others leaned forward in their seats, eager to see whether Bruce Lee's reputation for speed was real or simply exaggerated stories. A few martial artists in the audience paid close attention to Bruce Lee's posture. They noticed something subtle in the way he stood, light on his feet, balanced and relaxed. His stance did not resemble the rigid positions taught in many traditional schools. Instead, it looked fluid, adaptable, almost like someone ready to move in any direction at any moment. Across from him, the Dutch champion radiated raw power. Her shoulders were squared, her stance grounded and heavy. She looked like someone prepared to drive forward with force, confident that no opponent could withstand the impact of her attacks. The contrast between them was impossible to ignore. One fighter represented sheer physical dominance. The other represented speed, timing, and a philosophy that challenged conventional thinking. Even before the match officially began, the tension in the arena continued to rise. Spectators sensed that something unusual was about to happen, though no one could predict exactly what it would be. Some expected a quick victory for the Dutch champion. They believed her size advantage alone would overwhelm Bruce Lee before he could establish any rhythm. Others were more curious. They had heard stories about Bruce Lee's reflexes, about how he could strike faster than most people could even react. They wondered whether those stories would survive the reality of facing a much larger opponent. Every second that passed before the opening bell seemed to stretch longer than the last. The Dutch champion stepped closer to the center of the ring, her expression focused and confident. She had fought many opponents before, and none of them had managed to challenge her dominance for long. From her perspective, this was simply another test of strength. But Bruce Lee's approach to combat had always been different. He did not see fights as contests of brute force alone. He saw them as moments where awareness, timing, and adaptability could shift the outcome in an instant. His training had always revolved around eliminating unnecessary movement, conserving energy, and striking with maximum efficiency. To the casual observer, he still looked smaller and less imposing than his opponent. Yet to those who studied martial arts closely, there was something unmistakable about the way he moved. He wasn't tense. He wasn't trying to prove his strength before the fight even started. He simply waited. The crowd continued murmuring as the referee prepared to signal the beginning of the match. Cameras flashed from different corners of the arena, capturing the moment when two dramatically different fighters stood only a few feet apart. For the Dutch champion, this was the moment to demonstrate that power ruled the ring. For Bruce Lee, it was simply another opportunity to show that martial arts could transcend size and expectation. The arena grew quieter as the anticipation reached its peak. Spectators leaned forward, their conversations fading into silence as both fighters focused on the center of the ring. The challenge that had begun with bold words and curiosity was now seconds away from becoming reality. The giant Dutch kickboxing champion, weighing nearly 240 pounds, stood ready to unleash the strength that had carried her through countless victories. And across from her stood Bruce Lee, calm, balanced, and prepared to answer the challenge in his own way. Bruce Lee stood quietly across the ring, his breathing steady and controlled while the noise of the Amsterdam arena hummed around him. The contrast between the two fighters was impossible to ignore. On one side stood a towering Dutch kickboxing champion, weighing close to 240 pounds, a fighter whose reputation had been built on strength and aggressive pressure. On the other side stood Bruce Lee, lean and calm, a martial artist who had spent years developing a philosophy that went far beyond brute force. For many spectators watching that night in 1971, the situation looked like a clear mismatch. Size had always played a powerful role in combat sports. The larger fighter usually carried more strength, heavier strikes, and the ability to absorb punishment that would overwhelm smaller opponents. The Dutch champion had used those advantages repeatedly. Throughout her career, her style was direct, powerful, and intimidating. She attacked with heavy kicks, forward momentum, and the confidence that most opponents would crumble once the pressure began. Bruce Lee understood this reality very well. He had spent years studying how fighters moved, how they reacted under pressure, and how physical advantages often shape the outcome of a fight. But instead of trying to match strength with strength, Bruce Lee built his strategy around a completely different idea. He believed the key to overcoming size was not resistance but efficiency. Speed, timing, and precision could disrupt even the strongest opponent if used correctly. Standing inside the ring that night, Bruce Lee did not appear concerned about the weight difference. His posture remained relaxed, his feet light against the canvas. He shifted his stance slightly, maintaining balance while observing every small movement from his opponent. This quiet observation was not hesitation. It was strategy. Bruce Lee believed that the first moments of any confrontation revealed more than hours of preparation. A fighter's breathing, their stance, the way they shifted their weight, these details could expose habits and patterns. By watching closely, he could anticipate how an opponent might attack and how their body would move once the fight began. Across the ring, the Dutch champion displayed the confidence of someone who had never truly been challenged by a smaller opponent. Her stance was solid and heavy, designed to deliver powerful strikes from a grounded position. Her shoulders were squared forward, and her eyes remained locked on Bruce Lee with clear determination. She believed this fight would be decided by force. The crowd sensed the tension between the two fighters. Conversations had slowed as spectators focused on the moment. Some leaned forward in their seats, eager to see how Bruce Lee would respond to the massive size difference. Others whispered predictions, convinced that the Dutch champion's strength would dominate the exchange. Bruce Lee continued to move lightly, his feet adjusting with small, controlled shifts. Unlike many traditional martial artists of the time, he did not lock himself into a rigid stance. His position remained flexible, ready to change instantly depending on the situation. This adaptability formed the core of his philosophy. Bruce Lee believed that rigid styles often trapped fighters in predictable patterns. When a martial artist committed completely to a single system, their movements became easier to anticipate. Bruce Lee wanted the opposite. He wanted freedom of motion, the ability to react without hesitation. He once described this idea as becoming like water, fluid, adaptable, capable of flowing around obstacles rather than colliding with them directly. Inside the Amsterdam ring, that philosophy shaped every detail of his strategy. He knew that attempting to overpower a 240-pound kickboxing champion would be foolish. Instead, He focused on movement, distance, and timing. If he could control the rhythm of the fight, he could reduce the impact of her strength advantage. Distance was the first element he considered. The Dutch champion relied heavily on powerful kicks and forward pressure. To use those techniques effectively, she needed space to generate momentum. Bruce Lee recognized that if he disrupted that space, either by closing distance quickly or shifting away at the right moment, he could limit the effectiveness of her attacks. Timing was the second element. Bruce Lee believed the most effective strike was not always the strongest one, but the one delivered at the exact moment an opponent was vulnerable. When a fighter launched a powerful attack, their body naturally shifted weight and balance. For a brief instant, their defenses weakened as their focus moved entirely toward offense. Those brief moments fascinated Bruce Lee. They represented opportunities. Rather than waiting passively for the Dutch champion to attack, Bruce Lee prepared himself to intercept movement. His approach focused on striking during the opponent's motion, disrupting their attack before it could fully develop. Speed formed the third element of his strategy. Bruce Lee's reflexes had already become legendary among martial artists who had seen his demonstrations. His strikes were known for their explosive acceleration, delivered with minimal telegraphing. He trained endlessly to reduce the time between intention and movement, allowing his attacks to arrive before opponents could react. Against a much larger fighter, this speed advantage could become decisive. The Dutch champion's strength required commitment. When she threw a powerful kick or punch, her body had to generate force through larger movements. Those movements created brief windows where her balance shifted and her defenses opened. Bruce Lee intended to exploit those windows. But strategy alone was not enough. Mental discipline played an equally important role in Bruce Lee's preparation. Facing an opponent significantly larger could intimidate many fighters. The psychological pressure of size differences often caused hesitation, and hesitation could be dangerous in combat. Bruce Lee refused to allow that pressure to influence him. Instead, he treated the situation as a technical puzzle rather than a physical contest. He focused on angles, reaction times, and efficiency of movement. By breaking the fight into smaller elements, he eliminated the emotional weight that size differences often created. The crowd watching that night could not see the calculations happening in Bruce Lee's mind. They saw only a calm fighter standing across from a massive opponent. Some spectators interpreted his calmness as uncertainty. Others began to notice something different. A few martial artists in the audience recognized the subtle details of Bruce Lee's preparation. They saw how his stance shifted slightly whenever the Dutch champion adjusted her footing. They noticed how his eyes followed her shoulders and hips, tracking the parts of the body that usually initiated movement. These observations revealed that Bruce Lee was not waiting idly. He was studying. Every breath his opponent took, every small adjustment in her stance became part of the information he gathered. The Dutch champion, confident in her physical advantages, focused primarily on preparing her attacks. Bruce Lee focused on understanding her rhythm. Rhythm in fighting often determines control of the match. When one fighter establishes a consistent pattern of movement, they begin dictating the pace of the exchange. Bruce Lee wanted to break that rhythm before it could form. To accomplish this, he prepared to introduce unpredictability. Instead of following conventional patterns, Bruce Lee planned to vary his movement constantly. Quick shifts forward, sudden changes in angle, explosive bursts of speed followed by immediate retreat. These variations could force his opponent to hesitate. Hesitation would slow her attacks. And once hesitation appeared, even a powerful fighter could lose control of the fight's tempo. The Dutch champion, however, appeared completely certain of her plan. Her shoulders rolled slightly as she warmed up, and her stance remained rooted with confidence. She believed the fight would begin with overwhelming pressure, forcing Bruce Lee backward until he could no longer escape her range. The audience sensed that moment approaching. Both fighters now stood closer to the center of the ring. The referee prepared to signal the start, while the crowd grew quieter with anticipation. Camera flashes flickered briefly in the dim light above the arena, capturing the image of two fighters who represented opposite philosophies of combat. One relied on raw strength and intimidation. The other relied on speed, awareness, and precision. Bruce Lee's breathing remained steady as he adjusted his stance once more. His body stayed loose, prepared for immediate movement in any direction. The tension in the arena continued building as spectators waited to see which approach would prevail. To many people watching, the outcome still seemed obvious. Size had always been one of the most visible advantages in fighting, and the Dutch champion possessed it in overwhelming measure. But Bruce Lee had spent years proving that visible advantages were not always the decisive ones. Hidden within speed, timing, and strategy were possibilities that many fighters never considered. Inside the Amsterdam ring, Bruce Lee prepared to demonstrate exactly how those invisible advantages could challenge even the most intimidating opponent. The moment the bell rang, the energy inside the Amsterdam arena shifted instantly. Conversations disappeared, replaced by a sudden silence that spread through the crowd. Everyone's eyes locked onto the center of the ring where Bruce Lee and the Dutch kickboxing champion faced each other for the first true moment of the fight. For a brief second, neither fighter moved aggressively, but the tension between them felt almost physical, like the air itself had grown heavier. The Dutch champion made the first adjustment. She stepped forward with confidence, her foot striking the canvas with solid weight. Her presence alone seemed to fill the ring. Fighters who had faced her before often described the same feeling during the opening seconds of a match. Pressure. She liked to close distance early, forcing opponents backward while she prepared her powerful kicks. Her style was built on momentum. Once she began moving forward, she rarely stopped. Bruce Lee noticed everything. His eyes tracked her shoulders, her hips, and the subtle shifts in her stance. While she stepped forward with power, he moved lightly, almost gliding across the canvas. The difference in movement styles immediately became clear. She moved like a force pushing forward. Bruce Lee moved like someone flowing around that force. The crowd began murmuring again as they watched the contrast unfold. The Dutch champion raised her guard and advanced another step, testing the distance between them. She expected Bruce Lee to retreat completely, to circle the ring and avoid the center where her strength could dominate. Many fighters had done exactly that when facing her. Bruce Lee did move backward slightly, but not with fear. His retreat was controlled and measured. Each step maintained the same balanced posture he had shown before the fight began. He wasn't running from the exchange. He was adjusting the distance, studying the rhythm of her movement as she approached. The Dutch champion decided to escalate. With a sharp motion of her hips, she launched the first real attack, a powerful kick aimed toward Bruce Lee's midsection. It was the kind of strike that had ended many fights before they truly started. Her leg moved with surprising speed for someone of her size, and the force behind the kick could be seen even before it reached full extension. Gasps echoed through parts of the crowd as the attack came forward. But Bruce Lee had already begun, moving. Instead of stepping directly backward, he shifted slightly to the side. The movement looked almost effortless. A small adjustment that redirected his position just enough to avoid the full impact of the strike. Her kick cut through the space where he had been standing a moment earlier. The difference between their approaches became obvious immediately. The Dutch champion attacked with power, committing her weight into the strike. Bruce Lee responded with efficiency, using the smallest possible movement to avoid danger. But something else happened in that same instant. As her kick extended and her balance shifted forward, Bruce Lee saw the opening he had been waiting for. When fighters commit to powerful strikes, their bodies naturally create brief moments of vulnerability. The Dutch champion's momentum carried her slightly forward, and her guard opened just enough to expose a narrow target. Bruce Lee moved faster than most people in the arena could clearly follow. His body snapped forward with explosive precision. The strike he delivered was not large or dramatic. It was quick, direct, and incredibly focused. The sound of the contact was sharp, echoing briefly in the sudden silence that followed. The entire exchange had taken less than a second. The Dutch champion immediately pulled her leg back, adjusting her stance again. Her expression changed slightly. as she realized the speed she had just encountered. She had expected Bruce Lee to avoid her attack, perhaps even retreat further across the ring. What she had not expected was the speed of his response. The crowd reacted instantly. Murmurs spread through the audience, followed by bursts of excited conversation. Many spectators had barely processed what they had just seen. Some turned to the people sitting beside them, asking if they had noticed the strike that followed the kick. Bruce Lee had already moved again. He returned to his balanced stance, his feet shifting lightly across the canvas as he maintained distance. His breathing remained calm, and his posture showed no sign of panic or strain. The exchange had unfolded exactly according to the principles he believed in. Intercept, disrupt, and move. The Dutch champion adjusted her guard, now more cautious than before. The first attack had not delivered the result she expected. Instead of overwhelming Bruce Lee, it had revealed just how quickly he could respond. She stepped forward again, but this time her movement carried slightly more hesitation. Bruce Lee noticed it immediately. Hesitation, even for a fraction of a second, could change the rhythm of a fight. A fighter who begins to question their timing often loses the aggressive flow that made their style effective. The Dutch champion still possessed tremendous power, but now she had to consider the speed standing in front of her. She launched another attack, this time combining a quick forward step with a heavy punch. The strike carried significant force, her shoulder turning sharply as she attempted to close the distance and trap Bruce Lee near the ropes. But Bruce Lee was already moving. His feet shifted sideways again, creating an angle that forced the punch to travel through empty space. As the Dutch champion's momentum carried her slightly forward, Bruce Lee delivered another rapid counter. The movement was so fast that several spectators later described it as almost invisible. The sound of the strike echoed again, sharper, this time. A ripple of astonishment spread through the crowd. People who had expected a slow build-up to the fight were now witnessing something completely different. The exchanges were happening in sudden flashes, moments of explosive movement followed by calm repositioning. Bruce Lee never remained in one place long enough to become an easy target. Each time the Dutch champion tried to establish pressure, he disrupted her timing with sudden counters and swift changes in angle. The fight had not become a contest of strength. It had become a contest of speed and reaction. The Dutch champion attempted to regain control by stepping forward more aggressively. She threw another powerful kick, this time aiming higher toward Bruce Lee's upper body. The force behind the strike was undeniable, and the audience could feel the intensity building with every attempt. But once again, Bruce Lee moved just outside the arc of the attack. His response came instantly. A quick forward burst, a precise strike, and then he slipped away before the Dutch champion could fully recover her balance. The pattern repeated itself so quickly that the audience struggled to follow every detail. Each exchange lasted only seconds. Each moment revealed the same contrast: power meeting speed, force meeting precision. The crowd's reaction began to shift. Earlier whispers about the size difference were now replaced by excitement and disbelief. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, trying to capture every movement unfolding in the ring. Many had expected the Dutch champion's strength to dominate the fight. Instead, they were watching Bruce Lee control the rhythm through timing and awareness. Every time she committed to a heavy strike, Bruce Lee intercepted the moment with lightning-fast counters. His movements remained compact and efficient, never wasting energy on unnecessary motion. The Dutch champion's attacks still carried immense power, but now they were chasing a target that refused to remain still. And with every passing exchange, the shock inside the Amsterdam arena continued to grow. The energy inside the Amsterdam arena had completely transformed. What had begun as curiosity and skepticism had slowly turned into astonishment. The audience had expected a straightforward contest where size and raw strength would dominate the outcome. Instead, they were witnessing something far more complex unfolding in front of them. Bruce Lee continued moving with the same calm precision he had shown from the very beginning. His footwork remained light, almost effortless, as he adjusted his position around the ring. Each step carried intention. Each shift in angle forced the Dutch kickboxing champion to constantly readjust her stance. For someone accustomed to controlling fights through sheer power, this change in rhythm was frustrating. The Dutch champion had built her reputation on overwhelming opponents quickly. Her style relied on forward pressure, heavy kicks, and relentless strikes designed to break an opponent's defense through force alone. Most fighters she faced struggled to keep distance once she began advancing. The pressure itself often caused hesitation, but Bruce Lee refused to give her that advantage. He never allowed himself to remain trapped in one position. Every time she attempted to close distance with a powerful strike, he shifted away just enough to remove the full impact. At the same time, he used those moments to create opportunities for rapid counters that landed before she could fully recover. The crowd could now clearly see the pattern developing. The Dutch champion attacked with power. Bruce Lee responded with speed, timing, and movement. But something deeper was happening beneath the surface of the fight. What the audience was witnessing was not just a physical contest between two fighters. It was the collision of two completely different philosophies of martial arts. For decades, many fighting systems had focused heavily on strength, structure, and rigid techniques. Fighters trained to perfect specific movements within their style, repeating them until they became automatic. Power and discipline were considered the foundations of effectiveness. Bruce Lee respected discipline and training, but he believed martial arts should evolve beyond rigid boundaries. He believed that no single style contained all the answers. Every fight, every opponent, and every moment required adaptability. Instead of forcing techniques into predetermined patterns, Bruce Lee believed fighters should respond naturally to the situation unfolding in front of them. This belief had shaped everything about the way he trained and fought. Inside the Amsterdam ring, that philosophy was now being tested in the most visible way possible. The Dutch champion represented the traditional belief that strength and dominance controlled the fight. Bruce Lee represented the idea that efficiency, speed, and awareness could overcome even overwhelming physical advantages. Spectators began to realize they were watching more than a simple challenge match. They were watching a demonstration of how martial arts could function differently. Each time Bruce Lee moved, the difference became clearer. His stance remained fluid rather than rigid. His strikes appeared suddenly, traveling the shortest possible path to their target. Instead of trying to match his opponent's force, he redirected momentum and created openings through timing. To many people in the audience, it almost looked like Bruce Lee was operating on a different rhythm entirely. The Dutch champion continued pressing forward, determined to reassert control over the fight. She launched combinations of strikes designed to trap Bruce Lee near the ropes where her strength could finally dominate the exchange. Her kicks remained powerful, her punches heavy with commitment, but the more she pushed forward, the more Bruce Lee adjusted. He slipped to the side, stepped out of range, and returned with lightning-fast counters that disrupted her attacks before they could fully develop. Every movement seemed designed to conserve energy while forcing his opponent to work harder for every opportunity. The difference in efficiency began to show. While the Dutch champion relied on powerful bursts of offense, Bruce Lee's approach used minimal motion to achieve maximum effect. He did not waste energy on unnecessary strikes or dramatic displays. Every action had a clear purpose tied directly to the moment in front of him. For the audience, the lesson unfolding in real time became impossible to ignore. Size alone did not guarantee control of a fight. Power alone did not guarantee victory. Speed, awareness, and adaptability could completely change the balance between two fighters. Several spectators who practiced martial arts themselves began discussing what they were seeing. They noticed how Bruce Lee intercepted attacks rather than simply blocking them. Instead of meeting force with resistance, he redirected it or moved away entirely, leaving the attacking fighter momentarily exposed. These moments of exposure were when Bruce Lee struck. His counters arrived quickly and precisely, landing before the Dutch champion could rebuild her defense. Each exchange reinforced the same idea. The fight was being decided not by strength but by timing and control of distance. The Dutch champion still carried tremendous physical presence inside the ring. Her strikes remained dangerous, and every attack forced Bruce Lee to remain alert. But the rhythm of the fight had clearly shifted. Instead of dominating through pressure, she was now reacting to Bruce Lee's movement, and reacting meant losing control. Bruce Lee's philosophy often emphasized simplicity. He believed the most effective techniques were those stripped of unnecessary motion and complexity. By reducing movement to its most efficient form, a fighter could react faster and conserve energy for longer periods of time. Inside the Amsterdam arena, that principle was unfolding with remarkable clarity. While the Dutch champion exerted significant effort with every powerful attack, Bruce Lee continued moving with controlled precision. His breathing remained steady, his posture balanced, and his reactions immediate. To the audience, the difference began to feel almost dramatic. Earlier in the evening, many had assumed the fight would revolve around physical size. Now they were watching a completely different story develop, one where understanding movement mattered more than raw power. The realization spread gradually through the crowd. People began leaning forward, studying Bruce Lee's footwork and the angles he created with every shift in position. His ability to control distance prevented the Dutch champion from fully unleashing her strength. By staying just outside the ideal range for her attacks, he forced her to reach further and commit more energy. Each extra inch of movement created new openings. Bruce Lee used those openings immediately. The audience erupted several times as his counters landed with sudden speed. Some spectators could barely follow the sequence of movements before the exchange had already ended. The pace of the fight had become unpredictable, filled with bursts of explosive motion followed by brief moments of calm repositioning. Those watching closely began to understand that Bruce Lee's greatest advantage was not simply speed, it was awareness. He observed his opponent continuously, reading the smallest shifts in balance and posture. Those subtle signals allowed him to react before an attack had fully formed. By moving first, even by a fraction of a second, he controlled the flow of the exchange. The Dutch champion's determination remained strong. She continued pushing forward, refusing to abandon her aggressive style despite the challenges she faced. Her power was still capable of ending the fight if one strike landed cleanly. But Bruce Lee never allowed that opportunity to develop easily. Every time she attempted to establish pressure, he disrupted the rhythm again. Step, shift, intercept. The simplicity of the pattern hid the deeper lesson unfolding in front of the audience. Martial arts was not limited to physical attributes. It was a study of movement, timing, and adaptation. Bruce Lee had spent years refining that understanding, drawing inspiration from multiple disciplines rather than restricting himself to one system. He believed fighters should absorb what was useful, discard what was unnecessary, and build a style that responded naturally to real situations. Inside the Amsterdam ring, that philosophy was no longer just theory, it had become visible. The spectators who entered the arena expecting a straightforward display of power were now witnessing a different kind of mastery. One built on awareness, speed, and efficient movement. The lesson extended beyond the fight itself. It suggested that martial arts could evolve. It suggested that creativity and adaptability might become just as important as strength. For many people watching that night, the experience changed how they viewed combat entirely. They began to see that fighting was not simply about dominating an opponent through force. It was about understanding motion, timing, and the subtle balance between offense and defense. And as Bruce Lee continued moving with calm precision inside the Amsterdam ring, the realization spread through the audience that they were witnessing something far more significant than a simple challenge match.